Hey everyone, there's been a lot of talk lately about changing up the method used for calculating the annual cost of living adjustment to Social Security benefits. So today, I want to dive deeper into this and go over what's being proposed and how it differs from the way it's currently being calculated. Be sure to stay tuned to the end though. I want to tell you what I think is the perfect solution that will make everyone happy. And how rare is that? You know that over the next few years, there's going to be a massive amount of reform proposals for Social Security. Now, some of these are going to be introduced for nothing more than the soundbite on the news. The sponsors know it'll never make it out of committee and have a vote. As we get closer to the point where the trust fund is depleted, there's going to be entire political campaigns built on the promise of saving Social Security. I don't cover every proposal that comes out. I normally only talk about one if it gets traction through the legislative process, but over the next few years, I'd look for more proposals to come out than we've ever had before. And when they get to the point of being serious, I'll be right here telling you what you need to know so you can separate the fluffy political speak and find out what you really need to know. So if you haven't subscribed yet, you need to. And go ahead and hit that notifications bell too so you'll know as soon as I publish a new video. So there's one provision that's been introduced in just about every Social Security reform proposal in recent history. And that's to change the way the cost of living adjustment is calculated. Now, this would be a switch from the current method, the CPI-W, to the experimental index, the CPI-E. This is a piece of the Social Security 2100 Act, Social Security Expansion Act, and just about every other proposal to fix the program. Now, these politicians that have advocated for this have done a really good job at selling this change as a benefit increase and a good thing for people who are receiving benefits.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics has developed a measure of the real impact of inflation on seniors. It's called the CPI-E, and if we adopt it today, it would generally increase the benefits for our retirees, not cut them.
In addition, under this bill, we would increase COLAs for senior citizens by more accurately measuring the spending pattern for senior citizens through the Consumer Price Index for the elderly.
We also follow what the ARP has been recommending for some time called CPI-E. E standing for the elderly, but also the essentials that the elderly need is how I like to talk about it.
It appears that this positioning has worked on convincing the public that changing to the CPI-E is necessary. Now, to get an idea of how my audience is thinking about this, I put a poll out in the community section. The question I asked was, should the method of determining the Social Security COLA be changed? If so, what should be the new measurement method? The options were keep using the CPI-W, that's the current method, switch to CPI-E, switch to chained CPI. The responses were that 17% believed we should keep the current COLA method, and an overwhelming 72% said that we should switch to the CPI-E. And then the remaining 11% thought that we should switch to the lesser known chained CPI. So based on this somewhat small sample size, it was a few hundred, it appears that most people believe the CPI-E would be a better method for determining the annual cost of living increases to Social Security. But would it? Or could this actually result in lower cost of living increases? Let's dive in and find out. So to give the full context, we need to fully understand how the current cost of living increase is calculated every year. That way the comparison of the changes will make more sense. Right now, Social Security benefits are annually adjusted based on changes to the CPI-W, which stands for the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. This inflation gauge is compiled and published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, a lot of people believe that the CPI-W method shouldn't be used because it doesn't measure the way retirees spend their money, which is different than individuals who are not retired. For example, retirees tend to spend more on health care and housing and less on education, consumer electronics, and transportation. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics has been keeping up with an alternative index called the CPI-E. This version of the CPI is meant to track the expenses specifically for Americans who are 62 years of age or older. And while both the CPI-W and the CPI-E measure the same categories of goods and services, they have different weightings to the category. So for comparison, let's look at the two indexes side by side and see how they differ in measuring the goods and services we buy. In total, each index measures 8 main categories. There's housing, food and beverages, transportation, medical care, recreation, apparel, and then education and communication, and then finally, other goods and services for the stuff that doesn't fit elsewhere. When you see these side by side, you can tell that the big differences are in the medical care, transportation, and housing categories. The thought is that since seniors spend more of their money on health care and housing, the index should assign a higher weighting to those. And since they don't spend as much on transportation costs, like cars, it shouldn't assign as much weighting there. But the big question is here, how does this measurement method affect the actual cost of living adjustments for benefits? Would it result in a larger benefit increase for seniors, or could it actually result in a lower increase? Let's look at some data. Using the CPI-E data available from December of 1982, we could go back and do a year-by-year comparison with the CPI-W, the version that's currently being used. When viewed side by side, you can see that there are some years where the CPI-W was ahead, but in most years, the CPI-E was slightly higher. And when you average this out, if the CPI-E would have been used, it would have resulted in an annual cost of living adjustment that was 0.2% higher on average. But when we zoom in, the results start to look a little different. Over the first 20-year period that we have to compare these two measurement methods from 1983 through 2002, the CPI-E would have resulted in cost of living increases that were 0.3% higher every year. But since 2002, that's changed. The difference between the two measurement methods has only been 0.05%. Now, much of that difference is due to the 2021 results where the CPI-W was 1.1% higher than the CPI-E. But the gap between these two measurement methods has narrowed. And if this year continues to go as it has thus far, we're going to see another year where the CPI-W results in a higher cost of living than would have been given by the CPI-E. And if it's higher by 1%, this is going to mean that the 20-year average of the CPI-W is going to be higher than the 20-year average of the CPI-E. So why is this? Well, it goes back to the weightings of the two measurement methods. As we noted a moment ago, the CPI-E assigns a higher weighting to medical care. Relative to the rest of the economy, medical care costs have not been increasing as fast. The same results with opposite weightings applies to the transportation category. The CPI-E has a lower exposure to increasing transportation costs that has muted the impact to that index. Now, there's a lot of other reasons and rationales here, and if you want to take a deeper dive into this, I'm going to link up some research in the description from Alicia Monell at the Center for Retirement Research. She has some fantastic insights on this, and you really ought to give that a read if you're a curious type person. But ultimately, just understand the CPI-E is not a magical formula. I know that on paper it sounds good. An index that more accurately represents the expenses of retirees should work better. But I'm going to tell you, no politician wants to be responsible for making the switch to the CPI-E in a year where the new method results in worse results. And then additionally, there's a few other issues with this measurement method. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is very blunt about this being an experimental index. And the Government Accountability Office also released a report that identified several issues with the accuracy of the CPI-E and specifically mentioned the small sample size as a factor. So here's a suggestion that I think would work and would keep people happy, and I hope a politician or at least someone from their office is watching right now. This is very simple. At the end of every year, simply give the cost of living adjustment from the highest of the CPI-W or the CPI-E. That benefits the retirees who are receiving these benefits, and it de-risks the legislative move for these politicians. So to me, sounds like a classic win-win. But I'd also like to hear what you think. Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching.